My daughter said he deserved prison after framing me for robbery and had me in jail for 6 years, so I recorded her confession and destroyed her in court. Hi, folks. I, a 52-year-old male, never thought I'd be airing this out here, but I guess I need to. It's not easy to admit when someone you care about deeply, someone you do anything for, turns out to be your worst nightmare. This is about my daughter, Maddie, and the mess that flipped my entire life upside down. Growing up, Maddie was the kind of kid every parent hopes for. She was curious, kind, and had this bright, imaginative personality. She loved drawing comics and creating little stories about our family. There was one where I was a superhero who always burned dinner, which, okay, fair point. Her laugh could fill the whole house, and she had this way of making everyone feel included. I miss that Maddie more than I can say. My wife Emma and I were high school sweethearts. We weren't perfect, but we made it work. We didn't have much when Maddie came along, but we did everything we could to give her a good life. I picked up extra shifts at the auto shop while Emma worked as a nurse. We weren't rolling in money, but Maddie never went without. I think one of my favorite memories from back then was her 8th birthday. She'd been obsessed with dinosaurs for months, so we turned the backyard into Jurassic Maddie. I even built a cardboard T-Rex that almost collapsed when she poked it. She laughed so hard she fell over. That's the kind of thing I thought we'd always have, simple, happy moments. Things started to change when Maddie hit her teenage years. It wasn't all at once, it was more like little shifts here and there. At first, it was just normal teenage stuff, giving me more attitude, rolling her eyes at my jokes, spending more time with friends and less time at home. Emma and I figured it was just a phase every kid goes through, right? But by the time Maddie started high school, those little shifts started turning into real cracks. She began hanging out with a new group of friends. I didn't know much about them, except that they were always loitering at the gas station down the street or riding around town on their bikes like they had nothing better to do. I'd see them once in a while, blasting music on their phones and laughing like they owned the world. Emma didn't care that much, but something about them didn't sit right with me. Call it dad intuition or whatever you want, but I had a feeling these kids weren't going to be a good influence. Maddie started changing. She wasn't as open with us anymore. She'd come home late and claimed she was studying at a friend's house, even though her grades were starting to slip. One of the first real arguments we ever had was about her skipping school. I got a call from her principal one day telling me Maddie had been marked absent 3 times in 1 week. When I confronted her, she said, "What's the big deal? Everyone skips sometimes." "The big deal," I told her, "is that skipping school now leads to skipping bigger responsibilities later. That's not how we raised you." She just rolled her eyes and said, "Whatever, Dad." Emma stepped in to calm things down, but I could see it in her eyes. Maddie didn't care what we had to say. It wasn't like her. Things got worse when Kyle came into the picture. Kyle was Maddie's first boyfriend, and man, I could tell from the moment I met him that he was bad news. He was a couple of years older than her, had dropped out of high school, and didn't seem to have any plans except hanging out with his friends and figuring things out. I mean, the guy didn't even bother to shake my hand when I introduced myself. Maddie, of course, was smitten. She started spending all her time with him, and when she wasn't with him, she was texting him non-stop. Emma thought it was just a teenage crush, but I could see it was more than that. Kyle wasn't just a distraction, he was pulling her further away from us. One night, Maddie came home way past her curfew. When I asked where she'd been, she said she'd been out with Kyle and lost track of time. I told her, "That's not an excuse. You need to respect the rules of this house." She snapped back, "I'm not a little kid anymore. I can take care of myself." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was the same kid who used to crawl into bed with us during thunderstorms because she was scared of the lightning. Now she was acting up like she didn't need us at all. Emma tried to mediate, but it only made things worse. Maddie started yelling about how we didn't trust her and how we didn't understand what it was like to be her. "I hate this house," she said, slamming her bedroom door so hard. I tried to tell myself it was just teenage rebellion, but deep down, I knew we were losing her. She was pulling away, and no matter what we did, it felt like she was slipping further out of reach. The breaking point came when Maddie announced she was moving in with Kyle. She was only 17, still in high school, and had no way to support herself. I told her flat out, "You're not going anywhere with that guy. He's a jerk, Maddie. He doesn't care about you. He only cares about himself." She exploded. "You don't know him like I do," she yelled. "You just hate that I'm happy." I tried to stay calm, but it wasn't easy. "I hate that you're throwing your life away for someone who doesn't deserve you," I said. "If you leave now, don't expect to come back when it all falls apart." She grabbed her bag and walked out the door without looking back. I stood there watching her leave, trying to convince myself that maybe she'd come to her senses. Later, I learned the truth about Kyle. He wasn't just some loser, he was a full-blown addict, dragging Maddie into a world I never wanted her near. For the next 2 years, she was gone. We barely heard from her, except for a few short calls or texts. Emma and I tried to move on, but it wasn't easy. Every time I saw her old room, I felt like I'd failed her somehow. Eventually, she came back. She showed up at the front door one afternoon looking like the 2 years away had aged her 10. She had a duffel bag slung over her shoulder and this sheepish look on her face that screamed, "I messed up." Emma was the first to open the door, and before I could even say a word, she had pulled Maddie into a hug. "I'm sorry," Maddie mumbled into her shoulder. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Emma didn't even hesitate. She let her in, started asking if she'd eaten, and told her she could stay as long as she needed. I stood there in the hallway feeling torn. Part of me was relieved she was safe, but the other part of me remembered all the yelling, the slamming doors, and the way she left. I wanted to believe this was her turning a new leaf, but something in my gut told me otherwise. At dinner that night, Maddie didn't say much. Emma tried to catch her up on family stuff, how Aunt Linda got a new dog, how the neighbor's kid was going off to college, little things like that. Maddie just nodded and pushed her food around on her plate. Finally, I decided to cut to the chase. "So what happened with Kyle?" I asked. Maddie's face tensed for a moment, but she quickly shrugged it off. "We broke up," she said, like it wasn't a big deal. "That's it? After 2 years you just broke up?" Emma shot me a look, but I didn't back down. I wanted answers. "Things didn't work out okay," Maddie snapped. "Can we not talk about it?" I let it go, but the way she avoided eye contact told me there was more to the story. I didn't press her, though. I figured she'd open up when she was ready. Over the next few weeks, Maddie settled back into the house like she'd never left. At first, it wasn't so bad. She helped Emma with chores and even talked about maybe getting a job. I started thinking that maybe this was a good thing, a chance for her to start fresh. But then, little things started happening. One day, I couldn't find my wife's watch. It wasn't an expensive one, but it had sentimental value. I asked Maddie if she'd seen it, and she swore up and down that she hadn't. Emma told me I was being paranoid and that I started to forget because I'm getting older. But something didn't sit right with me. A week later, I saw Maddie heading out the door with a purse I didn't recognize. I stopped her and asked where she got it. "Oh, a friend gave it to me," she said casually. "A friend, right." Then there was the cash. I usually kept a little emergency money in a jar in the garage, nothing much, maybe $50 or $60. One day I went to grab some and it was gone. When I asked Maddie about it, she acted offended. "Why would I take your money, Dad?" she said, her voice dripping with fake innocence. Emma brushed it off, saying, "Maybe you just misplaced it," but I knew better. I remembered the first time I saw that act. She was about 13 and $20 had gone missing from my wallet. Maddie swore up and down she didn't take it, but I caught that tiny flicker of a grin she tried to hide. Back then, I brushed it off as harmless teenage mischief. I ignored it, thinking it wasn't a big deal. I won't make that mistake again. As the months dragged on, things just kept vanishing around the house. It wasn't just cash anymore. Small electronics, jewelry, even my tools started disappearing. Every time I asked Maddie about it, she'd roll her eyes or storm off, swearing she had nothing to do with it. Meanwhile, she still hadn't bothered to find a job. "I'm working on it," she'd mumble every time I brought it up. But nothing ever changed. She spent most of her time glued to her phone or sneaking out late at night. The tension in the house was unbearable, and Emma kept making excuses for her. "She's just going through a phase," she'd say, as if that explained everything. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The real breaking point came a couple of months later. There was a knock at the door. 2 cops stood on the porch. "Are you Daniel Parker?" one of them asked. "Yes, officer. Is something wrong?" "We're investigating a robbery at an electronics store nearby," the cop said. "We have reason to believe your car may have been involved." My stomach dropped. "My car? That's impossible." The officer explained that the store had been robbed a few days earlier. The thief had loaded several laptops, gaming consoles, and other electronics into the trunk of a car that matched the description of mine. They had security footage, but it wasn't clear enough to make out a face. "We'd like to search your vehicle," the officer said, holding up a warrant. At this point, Emma and Maddie had come to the door. Emma looked worried, but Maddie was standing behind her, looking bored, like this was just a mild inconvenience. "Go ahead," I said, trying to stay calm. I had nothing to hide, so I figured the search would clear everything up. The officers walked over to my car and started going through it. Every sound, the slam of the trunk, the shuffle of their boots on the gravel, felt deafening. I stood frozen on the porch, my mind storming. I watched as one officer leaned into the back seat, his flashlight sweeping under the seats. "Found something," he called out. My heart stopped. I didn't know what to do, shout, run over, and explain that whatever they found wasn't mine, but the look on the officer's face when he stood up, holding a bag of electronics, told me it wouldn't matter. The weight of his glare felt heavier than the cuffs I knew were coming. "I swear I've never seen those before," I said, my voice cracking. "I don't even use the back seat. My car's been parked here for days. I don't know how that got there." The officers didn't look convinced, and I knew they wouldn't be. How could I explain something I hadn't even known existed? I used my car for work and errands, and that was about it. I rarely checked under the seats because honestly, why would I? I glanced at Maddie, desperate for some kind of reaction, shock, concern, anything. But she just stood there, her face impassive, almost bored. That look made everything worse. It hit me then that she wasn't surprised, not even a little. Her lack of reaction felt louder than any word she could have said, and in that moment I realized just how deep this went. At the station, things spiraled out of control. Sitting in the interrogation room, I was suffocating. The officer slid a folder across the table. "Here's the footage," he said, flipping it open to reveal grainy stills from the store's security camera. Sure enough, there was a car that looked exactly like mine parked outside the electronics store. The figure loading items into the trunk was wearing a hoodie and mask, but their build wasn't far off from mine. My stomach twisted into knots as I stared at the images, searching for some detail, anything that could prove it wasn't me, but the more I looked, the more damning it seemed. "That's not me," I said, my voice shaking. "I was at home that night. Ask my wife, she'll tell you." The officer didn't respond. Instead, he pulled out a statement from a witness. "We also have someone who claims they saw your car parked near the store at the time of the robbery." I leaned back in the chair, my hands trembling. "There has to be a mistake. I didn't do this. Why would I risk everything, my family, my job, for something like this?" But my protest felt hollow, even to me. The evidence was stacking up against me, piece by piece, and I could feel the room closing in. My mind raced, desperately trying to make sense of it all. How did those stolen items end up in my damn car? Who would even think to use me as a scapegoat? Then I thought of Maddie. The realization hit me like a slap, but I pushed it away. No, she wouldn't do this. She couldn't. As the officers continued their questioning, my thoughts grew louder and darker. Was this how it ended for me, branded as a thief? The idea of going home, facing Emma, and seeing the doubt in her eyes was unbearable. Worse still was the thought of Maddie sitting in the house, scrolling on her phone, acting like none of this had anything to do with her. By the time they brought me to the holding cell, the weight of it all came crashing down. Feeling the utter helplessness, I'd never felt so alone in my life. I kept thinking, what if I can't prove my innocence? What if this is it? The fear wasn't just about going to prison, it was about the people I'd leave behind. Emma would have to shoulder everything, and Maddie would just go on with her life, untouched by the storm she'd created. I leaned my head against the wall, trying to hold back tears. No matter how much I told myself I was innocent, the system didn't care about the truth, it only cared about what it could prove. The trial wasn't much better. Between the footage, the stolen items found in my car, and the witness testimony, I didn't stand a chance. The jury took one look at me and decided I was guilty. As I sat in that courtroom hearing the judge hand down a 6-year sentence, I couldn't help but glance at Maddie. She was sitting in the back row, scrolling on her phone like this was the most boring thing she'd ever seen. I didn't have the proof yet, but deep down I knew Maddie had set me up. I tried to stay calm, tried to process it all, but nothing made sense. How had Maddie even pulled this off? Why would she do this to me? I didn't get any answers that day, just a pair of handcuffs and a ride to the state penitentiary. Prison is a whole different world. The first thing you learn is that no one cares why you're there. Whether you're innocent or guilty doesn't matter to the other inmates. To them, you're just another guy in the system. It didn't take long for me to realize I was on my own. The first few weeks were the hardest. The noise, the rules, the lack of privacy. It all felt like too much. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out where it went wrong. I thought about Maddie and that blank look on her face when they arrested me. How could she live with herself after what she'd done? How could she sleep at night after putting her own father in prison? Emma visited me at first. She would bring me updates from home and tell me how hard things were without me there. But after a few months, the visits became less frequent. I could feel the distance growing between us. She'd always been the optimistic one, the person who believed in second chances and forgiveness, but even she started to waver. One day, during one of her rare visits, she said something that broke me. "Dan," she started, avoiding my eyes, "I need to ask you something." "Okay," I said, already knowing where this was going. "Are you sure you didn't do it?" I stared at her, completely stunned. "You really think I'd do something like that after all these years? You don't know me better than that." She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with her wedding ring. "It's just the evidence, Dan. It's hard to ignore." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. What was the point? Even my own wife didn't believe me anymore. After that, the visits stopped altogether. Emma sent a couple of letters, but they were short and full of excuses. Work was too busy, Maddie needed her help, money was tight. Eventually, the letters stopped too. Meanwhile, Maddie? Not a single visit, not a letter, nothing. It was like I didn't even exist to her. 6 years is a long time to think. I spent most of it replaying every argument, every red flag, every little moment that could have hinted at how far Maddie would go. By the time I got out, I had one goal. I needed answers. But stepping out of those gates felt strange. The world looked the same, but I didn't. Everything felt louder, sharper, like I was out of place. The walk to my old house felt like 100 miles. I wasn't sure what to expect, but the knot in my stomach told me not to get my hopes up. Emma opened the door. She looked older, tired in a way that hit me hard. Her eyes were a mix of guilt and pity. "Dan," she said softly, "you're home." "Yeah," I replied, stepping inside. The house felt the same but different, like it had moved on without me. Then I saw Maddie. She was on the couch, legs curled up, scrolling on her phone like nothing had happened. I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, her face thinner, her hair some shade of auburn that didn't suit her, but more than that, it was her expression. She looked up at me with a blank face, and then she smirked. She grew up, but that smirk stayed the same. "Welcome back, Dad," she said, her voice casual, almost bored. She didn't even bother to stand up, didn't say she missed me, nothing. Emma broke the silence, gesturing to the guest room. "I set up the spare room for you," she said quickly, like she was trying to fill the air. I nodded and went upstairs. The room was small, barely furnished. I sat on the bed and just stared at the wall. 6 years gone, and this is what I came back to. Living under the same roof as Maddie was unbearable. She didn't even try to hide her smugness. It was like she knew I couldn't touch her, couldn't prove anything. She thought that since the verdict had been served on me, the case was closed, and to her that meant she was in the clear. She must have thought she'd outsmarted everyone, that the law couldn't touch her now because the blame had already landed squarely on me. But I decided that I wouldn't let her get away with it. After 6 years of paying for a crime I didn't commit, I wasn't about to just sit back and let Maddie walk free. I knew her well enough to know she wasn't exactly the remorseful type. If anything, she probably felt invincible now, like she could do whatever she wanted without any consequences. One afternoon, Emma had left the house to do something, and I knew this was my chance. It had been weeks of living in this silent standoff, me trying to piece everything together, and Maddie acting like nothing had happened. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to hear her admit what she did. I found her in the living room, sprawled out on the couch with her feet on the coffee table, scrolling on her phone as always. I stood there for a moment, trying to figure out how to start, but before I could even say a word, she looked up at me and smirked. "What's up, Dad? You look like you've got something on your mind," she said sarcastically. I sat down across from her, phone in hand, and leaned forward without breaking eye contact. I tapped the record button. "Why'd you do it?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. She locked her phone and sat up, giving me a look like I just asked the dumbest question in the world. "Do what?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my eyes narrowing. "The robbery, the stolen stuff in my car, watching me get arrested and not saying a word. Why, Maddie, what was the point of all of it?" For a moment she just stared at me, like she was deciding whether or not to tell me the truth. Then she smirked, leaning back against the couch. "You really want to know?" "Yes, I want to hear it from you." Her smirk widened into a grin. "All right, Dad, you want the truth? Fine. Ever since you kicked me out, I've been waiting for a chance to get even. You made my life miserable, so I thought, why not return the favor?" I blinked, caught off guard by how blunt she was being. "What are you talking about? I didn't make your life miserable. I asked you to respect the rules of this house. You were stealing from us, Maddie. You were skipping school, sneaking out, doing whatever you wanted with no regard for anyone else." And she said with a shrug, "I was just trying to live my life. You're the one who decided to make it all about control." "Oh, Maddie, you can't do this, Maddie, you can't do that." "Guess what, Dad? Kicking me out didn't teach me some grand life lesson. It just made me hate you more." "Hate me?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "For what? For wanting better for you? For trying to keep you from throwing your life away with that crack addict, Kyle?" At the mention of Kyle's name, her expression darkened. "This isn't about Kyle," she snapped. "This is about you thinking you're better than me. You always wanted to control everything, my friends, my decisions, my life. Well, guess what? You couldn't control this, could you?" I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. "You destroyed my life, Maddie. 6 years of my life gone, and for what? Some petty revenge? Petty?" She scoffed, crossing her arms. "You have no idea what it was like, Dad. You kicked me out like I was trash, like I didn't matter. You said don't come back when it all falls apart, remember that? I was your daughter, and you treated me like I was nothing. So yeah, I wanted you to feel what that was like." I stared at her, trying to process the venom in her tone. This wasn't just rebellion or anger, this was hatred, pure and cold. Every word she said felt calculated, like she was trying to twist the knife deeper. "Why, Maddie?" I asked quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you just talk to me? Why did it have to be this?" She tilted her head, her smirk returning. "Because, Dad, this was more satisfying." Her words hit harder than I expected, but I couldn't let them distract me. "So framing me for a robbery after all these years was your solution? You think that justifies what you did?" She shrugged again, her face completely devoid of remorse. "It worked, didn't it? You went to jail and I got to live my life, fair trade." I felt a cold knot in my stomach, but I didn't let it show. I remembered the recording and pushed her to elaborate more. "You really don't feel bad about this, do you?" "Why would I?" she said. It's not like they can arrest me for it now. You already did the time. What are they going to do, put me in double jail? I stared at her, trying to process the sheer audacity of what she was saying. Here's a tip, though, she added, leaning forward with a wicked grin. You might want to be careful around me. You never know, if you get on my nerves, maybe I'll stash something else in your room, under your bed, or anywhere, really. You wouldn't want another vacation, would you? That was it. I couldn't sit there and listen to her gloat any longer. My hand, which had been resting on my lap, tightened around my phone. I had been recording the conversation since she started talking, and every word was crystal clear. I kept my expression neutral, not letting her see the storm raging inside me. You've changed, Maddie, I said, standing up, and not for the better. Oh, spare me the lecture, she said, waving her hand dismissively. You're not going to do anything, Dad. You never could. And I walked out of the room without another word, heading straight to my bedroom. As soon as I closed the door, I stopped the recording and played it back, listening to her words over and over. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it, the mockery, the complete lack of remorse, the way she enjoyed twisting the knife. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had something concrete, something that could finally prove the truth. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. On the same day I confronted Maddie, I contacted a lawyer. I didn't waste any time. The situation had gone on long enough, and I knew that if I didn't act now, Maddie would continue living her life as if nothing had happened. The lawyer I found wasn't cheap. He asked for 25% of any settlement I won, which was higher than usual, but I didn't have the luxury of being picky. He was sharp and confident, and after hearing the details of my case, he assured me that we had a strong shot. Not only can we go after her for falsely accusing you, he said, but we can also sue the state for wrongful imprisonment. The recording alone is powerful, but if we can add more evidence, we'll be unstoppable. I agreed. I didn't care about the money, not really. What I wanted was justice. No amount of money could give me back the 6 years I'd lost, the birthdays, anniversaries, and simple moments with my family. But proving my innocence, setting the record straight, that was worth everything to me. The court notification arrived the next day, and seeing it in black and white made everything feel real. Maddie would be summoned to court, and she'd have to face the truth. I couldn't wait to see the look on her face when she realized the game was over. That morning, I was walking out of the house to meet my lawyer and finalize the case details when I saw one of Maddie's old friends, Sarah. She was walking on the sidewalk when our eyes met. She froze, her face went pale, and she looked genuinely terrified. I gave her a nod, but I didn't stop to talk. I figured her fear was guilt. It was no secret that her friendship with Maddie had ended badly, and maybe seeing me reminded her of something she'd rather forget. I didn't think much of it until later that afternoon. After the meeting with my lawyer, I was back home reviewing the case when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi, Mr. Parker, it's Sarah. Can we talk? I stared at the screen, unsure what to make of it. Why would she want to talk to me now? I texted back asking what this was about. Her reply came quickly. I need to tell you something. I asked her to call me, but she insisted on texting instead. Her messages came in a flurry, each one more shocking than the last. I was there when Maddie did what she did, she wrote. She dragged me into it. I didn't know it would go this far. She told me to keep quiet, but I can't anymore. I sat there stunned as she admitted that she had been involved in the robbery and the setup. Maddie had convinced her to help steal the electronics and stash them in my car. Sarah had been hesitant at first, but gave in, too afraid of Maddie's anger to say no. I didn't know she'd frame you, Sarah continued. I thought she just wanted to hide the stuff temporarily, but when you got arrested, she told me to stay quiet. She said it was your problem now. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my emotions in check. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I can't live with it anymore, she replied. And I don't talk to Maddie anymore. My parents found out about what she did and forbade me from seeing her. She's a bad influence, and I should have realized it sooner. I didn't know whether to feel angry or relieved. Do you have any proof? I asked, cutting to the chase. She hesitated for a moment before replying, I have texts from back then between me and Maddie. I didn't delete them. I can send them to you, but you have to promise not to involve me. My family would kill me if they found out I was part of this. I promised her I wouldn't drag her name into it. All I needed was the evidence. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again with a series of screenshots. The texts were exactly what I needed. They outlined the entire plan. Maddie had not only orchestrated the robbery, but had also specifically chosen me as the scapegoat. Maddie, relax, Sarah. It's just my dad. He's an easy target. Sarah, I don't feel right about this. Maddie, get over it. He deserves it for kicking me out. He thinks he's so perfect. This will bring him down a notch. My stomach churned as I read through the messages, but I couldn't let myself dwell on the anger. Instead, I forwarded everything to my lawyer. His response was immediate. This changes everything, he said when we spoke on the phone. Between the recording and these texts, we've got her dead to rights. This isn't just a case anymore. It's a slam dunk. We spent the next few hours going over the evidence, piecing everything together into a cohesive narrative. For years, I'd felt powerless, trapped by a system that had failed me and by a daughter who had betrayed me, but now, for the first time, I felt like I had a chance to take back control. On the day of the trial, I was so nervous. As much as I had been looking forward to this moment, it wasn't easy walking into that courtroom. There were so many emotions tied to this, but I knew I couldn't let them distract me. Maddie was already there when I walked in, sitting at the defendant's table with her lawyer. She looked completely unfazed, leaning back in her chair with that same smug expression I'd seen so many times before. To her, this was probably just another annoyance she could brush off. I sat down with my own lawyer, who gave me a reassuring nod. He was confident in our case, and honestly, so was I. The proceedings began, and the judge called the courtroom to order. My lawyer opened by presenting the facts of the case, how I had been wrongfully accused and imprisoned, how Maddie had orchestrated everything, and how we had the evidence to prove it. Then it was time to present the evidence. The first thing we played was the recording. The courtroom fell silent as Maddie's voice filled the room, her words dripping with arrogance and cruelty. "You better be careful," her voice echoed. "Because if you get on my nerves, I might stash something else in your room. You wouldn't want another vacation, would you?" I glanced over at Maddie as the recording played. For the first time, her smug expression wavered. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her lawyer leaned over to whisper something to her, but she didn't respond. When the recording ended, the judge turned to Maddie. "Miss Parker, do you have anything to say about this?" Her lawyer tried to argue the recording's admissibility, but my lawyer was ready, proving it was legal and crucial to the case. The judge allowed it. Then we presented the texts. The court sat in intense silence as my lawyer highlighted Maddie's incriminating words. "He's an easy target, and he deserves it for kicking me out. He thinks he's so perfect. This will bring him down a notch." Maddie's lawyer claimed the texts were taken out of context, but the intent was clear. Maddie, visibly shaken, finally spoke, stumbling through an excuse. "I didn't mean for it to go that far. I was angry. It wasn't enough, not for me and not for the court." The judge's verdict was clear and decisive. I was exonerated, and Maddie was ordered to pay $100,000 in restitution for framing me. Additionally, the state awarded me $750,000 for my wrongful imprisonment, acknowledging the years I had lost. As the gavel fell, Maddie's stunned face said it all. This time, she couldn't talk her way out. In the weeks that followed, Maddie became a public disgrace, her actions condemned by everyone who heard the story. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my life. I found a small apartment, returned to school, and started working part-time at a nonprofit supporting the wrongfully convicted. Emma tried to reach out, but her doubts had broken something that couldn't be fixed. As for Maddie, she disappeared from my life entirely, her appeals rejected, her bridges burned. So yeah, that's where things stand now. It's been a long, messy road, but I finally started to move forward. I don't know if I'll ever fully heal from everything that happened, but at least I've got my life back, and my name is finally cleared. To anyone reading this, if you're going through something that feels impossible to overcome, don't lose hope. The truth has a funny way of finding its way out, even if it takes years. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me through all this. I guess this is the part where I try to rebuild and figure out what comes next. Life's not perfect, but it's mine again, and for now, that's enough.